After the school day ended at Bath Centralized School at the intersection of Bath and Cleveland-Massillon Roads, it was time for basketball practice on Tuesday, December 2nd, 1930. In the gymnasium on the first floor, athletic instructor Miss Grace Hutson was overseeing a basketball practice session with 13 teenage girls, while the boys were getting ready in the locker room. At 3:30 p.m., the janitor, ensuring the school stayed warm, loaded up the wheelbarrow with coal from the coal room to keep the furnace going for a few more hours. He could hear the dozen or so boys laughing and carrying on from the basement locker room while awaiting their turn in the gym. After he finished stoking the furnace, he headed upstairs along with all but 5 of the young basketball players. The 5 boys remaining had yet to change, so they decided to change in the furnace room, knowing it was now much warmer in there with the fresh load of coal. William Hazel, after getting dressed, took out a cigarette he had taken from his father that morning. The other boys eagerly waited for a chance to take a puff, when Will lit it with his matchstick. That was the last memory the boys had of that day. Right away, a powerful explosion occurred, causing the ceiling to rise, shaking the entire building and surrounding the boys in a fiery blast. The noise echoed throughout the school, shattering windows and sending glass fragments toward the children and teachers in the gymnasium above. The 5 boys were encased in flames, thrown against the wall, and they collapsed to the ground, 3 having lost consciousness. 2 of the boys in the furnace room were able to make their way out through the basement door, reaching the outside yard before collapsing and also losing consciousness. After the explosion, Miss Hutson assessed the girls and discovered 6 with minor injuries. She instructed everyone to go outside and then rushed downstairs to check on the boys. Despite being taken aback by the scene, she immediately sprang into action. With the help of the janitor and another teacher, they used a stretcher from their first aid kit to carry 3 severely injured boys to her car. Then Miss Hutson transported them to Children's Hospital. The remaining 2 boys were taken to People's Hospital by ambulance. All 5 boys sustained serious burns. Howard McKisson, aged 15, from Everett, Charles Cotting, aged 17, from Copley, and Kenneth Powers, aged 16, from Fairlawn, were in serious condition at Children's Hospital. William Hazer, aged 16, from Everett, was in critical condition, and Jack McCausland, aged 15, from Bath, was in fair condition at People's Hospital, now called City Hospital. Miss Hutson at Children's Hospital provided a first-hand report of the explosion as she awaited updates on the boys' well-being.
There was a terrific roar and the floor was thrown out from under us. We were knocked off our feet as the windows blew out and the doors gave way.
Fire gushed up after the blast that rocked the entire building, but the flames were quickly extinguished by teachers manning the hand extinguishers. More than 100 of the school's 350 to 400 total pupils were still in the building. Most of the buses make 2 trips. They had left on their first trip, and the students waiting for the next trip were waiting in their second-floor classrooms under the supervision of the teachers. Hours later, both Charles and Kenneth regained consciousness and embarked on a lengthy journey to recovery. They would spend an extended period in the hospital. Initially, Howard McKisson and Jack McCausland did not show signs of improvement for several weeks, but eventually, they started to make progress too. The following day, the building was examined by state and county officials. The walls were jarred and shoved out of place, floors lifted and windows broken. Surprisingly, the locker room was undamaged, with even the mirrors remaining intact. However, the pipes extending from the furnace were twisted and damaged, while the furnace itself remained unharmed. Regrettably, William Hazer passed away at 1:20 p.m. on Wednesday, December 2nd at People's Hospital. His funeral, originally scheduled at the Hazer home, was relocated to Bath Town Hall due to the high volume of attendees. He was buried in Bath Cemetery, where friends, family, and classmates came together. William was survived by his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Vincent Hazer, along with 3 brothers named Frank, Rudolph, and Vincent Jr., and a sister named Catherine. The other 4 survived and eventually thrived and lived to a ripe old age. Bath School reopened a week later, while repairs continued. The repairs cost about $7,000, which comes out about $125,000 today. 2 months later, there was a house fire on Gent Road that killed 2 children Betty Sorek, who was in the 11th grade at Bath School, and Joseph Sorek Jr., who was in the 1st grade. 3 spruce trees were planted in the spring of 1931 in memory of William Hazer, Betty Sorek, and Joey Sorek Jr. They were known as the Hazer-Sorek trees for many years. Unfortunately, the trees were removed in 2014 when a new sewer system went in and no new trees were put in place. Exactly 40 years later, in December 1970, the former Bath School principal and teacher, Roy Pugh, spoke of that dreaded day. Pugh was with some of the boys in the music room singing their favorite songs. Other boys were elsewhere to do something different, all waiting for their bus to arrive. After the furnace room explosion, the boys in the music room raised the first windows and jumped out before being overcome with smoke. Pugh groped his way through the smoke and found 2 boys.
It seemed like forever until the ambulance came. The 2 boys were so badly burned that they couldn't stand any covering.
Pugh frequently visited the boys in the hospital as they recovered. During this time, one of the blast survivors, Charles Cotting, gave Principal Pugh a dollar bill with the inscription, "Charles Cotting," and this bill went through the fire and explosion at Bath School December 1st, 1930. Roy Pugh carried that bill in his billfold until he passed away in 1978. Charles Cotting graduated in 1931 from Bath High. He moved to Mount Dora, Florida, and became self-employed as a mechanic and inventor. He passed away on September 12, 1995, at the age of 82. Kenneth Powers graduated from Bath High School in 1832. He lived most of his life in Bath while working at B.F. Goodrich. He also became a volunteer firefighter at the Bath Fire Department from 1957 until 1972. He passed away at the age of 80, December 5, 1994. Jack McCausland became an art dealer and served in both the Royal Canadian and the U.S. Air Force. Jack lived to be 78 and passed away on July 31st, 1993. Howard McKisson was a lifelong resident of Bath. He was often seen riding his Vespa around the village. He retired from the U.S. Postal Service as a carrier in 1979 after 26 years of service. He passed away on May 6, 2012, at the ripe old age of 97. All 4 survivors were war veterans.